last Saturday we had our midwinter conference here, and our district governor gave us an award. Oh, has everybody seen that? Okay. Now, since we can hang it in here, I'd like to present it to Carl Shank, since he's doing most of the work. Come on up here, Carl. Now see there, now you have me to put up with. Yay!
Hold it up, hold it up, hold it up.
Don't eat it.
Okay, Sarah Dickens came today and she brought the children and they brought a lot of glasses.
Hi, my name is Sarah Dickens, and I'm the student council sponsor at Livingston Intermediate School. And I brought here with me my student council officers. Bailey Sturm is our president. Kinsey Parrish is our vice president. Jackson David is our secretary. And Jackson Grimm is our historian. And we also have some student council members who were instrumental in collecting glasses for your program throughout the community. So we brought them here to deliver our glasses that we collected that can be repaired and given back.
Today, our speaker is Wanda Bobinger. She is the treasurer of the Polk County Historical Commission and ex-curator of the Polk County Museum, and she's an expert on American history, but her specialty, I believe, is Texas history, isn't it right, Wanda? And especially Polk County history. Welcome, please.
Thank you for having me here today. Can you hear me in the back? Henry Ager said, be sure and speak loud. Okay. Today, I'm going to be speaking to you about Chief John Blount. He was a principal chief born in 1773, and he was the son of a Coushatta Indian woman and a man named William Blount. Before I begin the story about Chief Blount, though, I want to give you some background on his father, William Blount. William served in the American Revolution. His regiment joined Washington's main army in the defense of Philadelphia. He was a signer of the Constitution of the United States. He became a state senator of North Carolina in 1788. George Washington appointed Blount as the governor, a territorial governor of the Florida territories. He later became superintendent of Indian Affairs. He brought Tennessee into statehood and later became a senator of the state of Tennessee. John Blount, his son, was a man that was clearly torn between two worlds, that of the Anglos and the Native Americans. He was caught up in the midst of turmoil and upheaval in America at the time, with European immigration and the settlers moving in, pressing westward, particularly in the states that we know today as Georgia and Alabama. This pushed the Native Americans deeper into the South and into Florida territory. The Native Americans were alarmed, and they formed an alliance that was later called the Creek Confederacy, and that was the bringing together of numerous Native American tribes, because they felt that they saw the encroachment that was coming, and they felt that they would have more power in numbers, and that they did, and that brought about great concerns from the government of America. There was a Choctaw Indian chief by the name of Red Shoes. If any of you happen to gamble over in Louisiana, you've probably heard the name Red Shoes there. But he was a well-known chief, and he was asked to work for peace between the settlers and the Native Americans. He was invited to go to New Orleans and did to speak for peace. It did not come about. In 1790, George Washington, president, invited 27 chiefs to come to New York City. And this was a big occasion. It was well publicized in the newspapers of that time, and they really pulled out all the stops for these 27 chiefs that were coming. There were cannons fired, gun salutes. The Native Americans were paraded through the streets in their full Indian regalia, which the city people of New York probably had not witnessed. And this was the occasion for the signing of the Treaty of New York. Again, as most of those treaties in the day, the treaty was broken. They even brought in an artist that sketched portraits of the 27 chiefs, and so they believed with all their heart that this was the time that it was going to take. The treaty was broken before Red Shoes could even make it back to where his people were, and so he began to lead them into Louisiana. Was not a state at that time. It was Louisiana Territory, of course. And he would make trips back to Alabama and Georgia lands to see the his people that were still in that area. But finally, he moved in to what was called at that time Spanish Texas. And that brought him to this area of Polk County. He settled on the Trinity River in what we know today as Kickapoo and Unalaska areas. Back in Florida, the Moultrie Creek Treaty of 1823 gave 6 principal chiefs 20 square miles of acreage in the Florida Territory where they were to form, or I mean, it was their land. It was given to them. And these chiefs were chosen because of the service that they had given to the United States during the War of 1812, the Creek War of 1813 and 14, and the Seminole War. One of these chiefs was John Blount. And John had served as a personal guide to Andrew Jackson. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed into law by President Jackson, would remove all Indians in that area to Oklahoma that was still unsettled by white settlers. Most of you are probably familiar with the stories of the Trail of Tears and the horrors that brought about, and that's what that 1830 Act of Removal did. However, now you have to remember also that these 6 chiefs that were given this 20 square mile acreage to have a reservation, they had gone against their own people. They were working for the American government, and so they brought great hatred from their own people, and some of them even had their families destroyed, their homes burned, their cattle stolen, and they dealt with a lot on that level. John Blount was given special permission to come to Texas instead of going to Oklahoma with the group that went in the Trail of Tears. And the reason for this clearly was his close association with Andrew Jackson. He was told that he could bring several sub-chiefs and a total of 256 of his people here to Texas to settle on the Trinity River. But 2 years after he was given this special permission, he was still not leaving Florida. And the reason was that he had a son and a nephew, Billy and Billy John, who had been sent to the Choctaw Academy in Kentucky. And basically, the Choctaw Academy was originally set up because they hoped to reach the minds of the young Native Americans in the academy to see things their way. And Blount was told that the son and the nephew had died of cholera, and he did not believe the story, and he sent 3 men with extra horses to go to Kentucky and either verify the deaths or bring the boys back. And after a time, they did come back, and so that began the long journey of Blount and his people of 256 to Texas. And the government provided a whaleboat for these people to board that would take them to New Orleans. And in New Orleans, they were to be met by government officials that would give them funds to make the journey on into Texas by foot. They were to receive money for food and just to be able to get here. But when they met the delegation, they were robbed and beaten, and some of them were put in jail. So the remainder of most of the group was still waiting at the whaleboat, and they were terrified and frightened, and so they, after a few days, they scattered in every direction, and many of those went back into Florida territory and went deeper into the Everglades where they could hide. And some of the descendants of that group of people actually still reside in that area today. And Blount did make it then with the rest of the group onto the Trinity River where his uncle Red Shoes was, and he died a few months later. Some say probably from cholera. We don't know. Could be from a broken spirit. There was a Frenchman here that had received a land grant, and he was married to a Coushatta woman as well. Her name was Muchi Antone, and the two of them decided to give to open their land to the remaining group of these poverty-stricken people here to form or whatever, but it did not go very well, and so most of them ultimately went on voluntarily to Oklahoma to join their kinsmen there, and only 17 of that group of people remained in this area. After the two young men grew up, Billy John and Billy, they were sort of co-chiefs for the remainder of that little group as long as there was anybody here. You're probably wondering, how did this union take place between this man who clearly was going to be very politically involved in the government and that sort of thing? How did this union come about between this Coushatta woman and William Blount? It was during the Yazoo land speculation, and that was one of the most significant acts of fraud in American history. In 1795, the Georgia legislature sold 35 million acres of land for $500,000. That would be 1.5 cents per acre to 4 land companies. One of the companies was owned by William Blount, and his partner was a man named Patrick Henry. Yes, our very same give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry. And of course the scheme was that they would, as the settlers were coming in, they were buying cheap and selling at a much, much higher price. So Calhoun County, Florida, today, it has their county seat is Blountstown, and that is the exact location of where John Blount's reservation was before he was removed from that. They have a very active historical society, and in the 1980s, a small group of people from Calhoun County came here, and a lot of you will certainly remember Moody Jackson, and Moody was involved in this project as well, and they came hoping to document more about John Blount from this end, from our angle here in Polk County, and they really wanted to locate the exact site of where they had settled on the Trinity, and thought they might be able to find the burial site, but that did not happen. I've had a long lasting correspondence with descendants of John Blount, and I was able in 1999 to be able to get the silver medallion that was presented by Andrew Jackson to John Blount. And that medallion, let me see, it read, "From President Andrew Jackson, President of the United States, to my faithful guide and servant, John Blount." And several years ago, just before I retired from the museum, one afternoon there was a phone call from the Smithsonian, and they were trying to locate the silver medallion. They weren't necessarily trying to acquire that. They wanted to document, if we knew how it had been handed down through the family and where it was today and that sort of thing, and I was able to help them with that. So what was the significance of, and I'm coming to a close. I know this is a busy meeting, but the significance of John Blount. He was a significant chief because of his relationship with Andrew Jackson. And Jackson wrote of him, "He has long been friendly to the United States, and in consequence has drawn down upon himself great vengeance. He has proven himself a most zealous friend and a faithful pilot. In justice to him, I am bound to state that to his correct knowledge of the country and his zealous attachment to the cause, I am indebted for the success of the war." That being the war, the Seminole War. But more importantly today, in our thinking, what was the significance of winning the Seminole War? And that war caused Spain to cede East Florida to the United States and to renounce all claims to the West. So when you consider when we say all claims to the West, that included land all the way into Wyoming and Montana. and the natural resources of Florida and of Louisiana and Texas. So it was a very significant thing. On a personal level, I just find it very fascinating that this man, half Anglo, half Native American, touched the lives somehow of people that we know in our American history and came here to settle in our little piney woods on the Trinity River. And I thank you for letting me bring his story to you. Quick questions, Bid said.
Do you know the name of the Frenchman that 17 of them actually stayed at?
John Burgess.
Burgess.
Uh-huh.
So
And
what
his
area?
his land was, do you know where Cedar Point subdivision and Blanchard, that would have been 1,480 acres of land. So it was all in that area. Mm-hmm. Yes. No, the medallion is in a family, a private family. It's kept in a bank vault. I worked diligently to try to encourage them to let us have it in our museum. No, they are not local. They live in Houston. And I hope it hasn't been sold and melted for silver at this point. But I did try, and I even encouraged Sam Houston Library to help us with that so that we could maybe have it 3 months in Livingston, take it to Liberty, and have it in Huntsville at the Sam Houston, because it would be a wonderful thing. But they are not willing to do that at this point. So, any other questions? Okay.
What's the purpose of the statue?
Oh, I'm so sorry. This was presented to me some years ago by Dr. Mary Blount, who was a direct descendant of John Blount. She called it a pathfinder for me, and I have needed it many times. And so this is kept at the museum, but it was a personal presentation to me for in appreciation for the research that I did and shared with family members, and she likewise shared much research with me. So,
Thank you very much.